Welcome back to another episode of 5 great JRPGs that sadly nobody played. Like in previous episodes, this is about JRPGs I've barely covered or never even covered before. So let's begin! Number 5. White Knight Chronicles Origins. I very rarely talk about this game, even though I played it recently live. It's exclusive to the PSP, but it was only released in Japan and Europe, never in North America. Probably because by the time of the localization, the original series on the PS3 had already been seen as a failure, sadly. Well, this is a prequel in terms of story and explains several things about the lore and why knights exist in the first place. It is a story-driven game, but it's also, unlike its predecessors on PS3, a quest-driven adventure. Your customizable character joins the Mobile Corps, a mercenary group traveling on a train, yeah? So off you go into different missions that usually involve getting to the boss and defeating it. You can take up to 3 more generic allies with no story or personality, but sometimes story characters like Arietta here will join you. You only control your main character in a combat system similar to the one in the previous games, quite like the one in the Xenoblade Chronicles games, where you learn skills as you progress and can equip them in a tab to be used on real-time combat. As in, you don't directly control the attacks of your characters in hack and slash, but rather just move him or her around and choose the skills you want from the palette. Once the Optimus bar is ready, you can trigger it and have everyone transform into these armored knights temporarily with enhanced stats. This is best used for the tough boss fights, of course. You'd be surprised to know this is a very easy game for the most part, but it does slowly increase its difficulty to satisfy a good challenge near the end. The music and the graphics are nothing special here, just average at best, but decent enough to accompany the game. And yes, I know, it can be repetitive since you do get sent to a lot of missions where you just go through a dungeon, kill everyone in the way, and beat a boss. But if you're a fan of the original 2 games, this is still pretty fun. Check it out if you can. Number 4. Izuna, the Legend of the Unemployed Ninja. This game is in the vein of the Mystery Dungeon series with titles such as Shiden the Wanderer. I'm usually on the fence with those, but Izuna here has one huge advantage most of the others don't. We'll get to that. Ninjas have become irrelevant, so Izuna, her master, and other disciples arrive in a sacred village looking for work. Unfortunately, Izuna can't resist stealing a holy crystal, and that angers the gods, punishing she and her friends. So it's her job now to calm the anger of each god by fighting them and receiving their elemental orb to change her friends back to normal. It's a comedy, as you may have guessed, but with creative writing and great humor. Graphics are beautiful for a Nintendo DS game that uses sprite work and pixel art. Music is fine, pretty folkloric and very Japanese. So there's only one village where you can talk to NPCs, and after each dungeon, they all have different things to say. A couple of shops are there where you can buy and sell stuff like healing items, which are extremely useful, but the most important place is the storehouse, since this is one of those games where if you die, you're taken back to the village and lose all money and items. It's in your best interest, therefore, to always store most of the items you gain in the dungeons here, including money in a deposit form as if it was a bank. That way you'll be able to withdraw weapons or items to explore the dungeon again, or money to buy healing items. Every dungeon has several floors to explore, which are randomly generated every time you enter, like in a roguelike. The goal is to find as many items as you can carry, fight enemies and find the stairs to the next floor until you eventually reach the boss. It's one of those where if you move, the enemy moves, or actually if you execute any action. Just keep in mind, whenever you want to use a talisman, it requires SP from Izuna, but there are healing items to recover SP as well. She can equip one weapon at a time, and they break after a time. You do get items that recover them or repair them, but her weapon equipped will influence her attack and defense stats, but they barely make a difference, because you know what? This game relies more on the leveling system. And that is the huge advantage I mentioned at the beginning. In most games of this kind, if you die you lose everything and go back to level 1, right? Not here. You lose everything except your level and experience gained. That motivated me enough to keep going addictively for several hours. It's still brutally hard though, and as a result the game turned into a grindfest, but as I said, a really addictive one. If you know what you're doing, you can beat the whole game in less than 10 hours actually, but using various grinding methods will make the adventure longer. I can't believe I missed out on this game all of these years. There's a direct sequel to it also on DS, and in 2023, a brand new game was announced for Switch and Steam, but we haven't heard anything more in a while. Anyway, this is a great game. Number 3, Infinite Undiscovery. Man, I haven't talked about this game in ages. Actually, people did play it for several years until the world just forgot about it. Nowadays, nobody plays it. Probably because everyone's so obsessed with remakes and remasters nowadays, and this game hasn't received such treatment. It's an exclusive to the Xbox 360, developed by Triace and published by Square Enix. You play as Capel, a failed musician who ends up in a prison, but the Liberation Force rescues him because he looks a lot like the leader and they could use him to fight on their side. Well, yeah. This force specializes in destroying the chains some evil order bound the entire world to the moon. These chains create misery, death, and starvation like a real plague. So, Capel reluctantly joins, and so starts the plot. A bit dark and mature, but that's no surprise coming from Triace. For its time, the graphics looked great, but maybe not impressive enough, especially with the character expressions. Just like the music from Motoi Sakuraba, I still think both departments are pretty damn solid though. Nevertheless, the gameplay in combat is what turned some people off. It's an action RPG where characters have different combos, especially the melee attackers, and up to 4 allies can fight during battles. So, depending on the combination of regular attacks you do a la hack and slash, you will shortly execute a skill as a follow-up. Capel can actually learn other party members' abilities with his own native skill Connect, which can be really useful in battle. Also, he can use his flute or whatever the hell this is to create buffs and debuffs, apart from features that are mandatory for some areas. They do make this wind instrument mechanic a big deal in the game. But what I like about it the most is how creative it is with a lot of the missions. Sure, you go from point A to point B in most areas that look like an overworld or dungeons, but in reality most of the gameplay is based on missions or boss fights, and you always gotta do something different to complete them, going from stealth mechanics to using cannons or shoot fire barrels for an explosion. Stuff like that is all around. I do, however, understand some of the complaints that this game can be a bit cryptic sometimes, or with difficulty spikes, and not all of the missions, creative or not, are that fun, actually. Some can be a pain in the ass, to be honest. But all in all, it's a really good game if you give it a chance. Don't be shy to play it on easy the first time, as it can be quite hard to properly understand and exploit its gameplay mechanics. Number 2, Monochrome Mobius, Rights and Wrongs Forgotten. Nobody played this JRPG because first, what's up with that name? Monochrome Mobius? And second, once the very few people who were interested on it found out it's part of the Uta Wareru Mono series, a bunch of visual novel strategy RPGs, they ignored it. Well, that series is freaking great, let me tell you that, but so is this game. And it's not a visual novel, nor is it a strategy RPG, and it takes place before the events of Mask of Truth and Deception. In fact, you don't even need to play them or any other game to get into this one. It's on PS4, PS5, and Steam. Ashtor wants to follow in his deceased father's footsteps and work for the Yamato Empire, but one day he finds a mysterious girl named Shunya who swears his father is still alive. So they join up together to go and find him, while Ashtor also becomes a soldier. It's a good written story, and no, NIS America didn't politicize the dialogue miraculously. The game's traditional, where you visit various towns with an overworld out there, but with the main town, which is the Yamato capital. Here's where you buy your items, use the blacksmith, fund the stores with materials so they can get better equipment, upgraded, etc. The usual stuff. But outside, the world awaits you with beautiful graphics and melodic music. No random encounters exist, so you can see the enemies around. Once you've surpassed their level a bit, you can just one-shot kill them while running around to gain extra materials and experience. I highly suggest doing that for grinding, cause this game is quite tough. Turn-based combat similar to Grandia is featured, where anyone can manipulate the turn order with attacks that delay or cancel a turn. This is why the game's very challenging. Other than that, you've got your skills and magic with limited usage like in most other JRPGs. When the console versions were released in North America, I made a full review of this game. You might want to check it out if you're really interested in playing it. Number 1. Ash, Archaic Sealed Heat. This is one of the first 3 JRPGs Hironobu Sakaguchi set out to develop when he left Square Enix. The other 2 were Lost Odyssey and Blue Dragon. Because he really liked the Nintendo DS though, he decided to develop this one specifically for it. It never left Japan, but it's been fan-translated for over 15 years. You take on the role of Queen Isia. During her crowning ceremony, a huge fire salamander burns everything and everyone to the ground except for her. However, Isia encounters her royal retainer Pulneku, yeah, that's his name, resurrected with a body of ash, hence the name of the game. Isia therefore acquires the powers to revive dead soldiers with bodies of ash and starts a journey to find the salamander. Some sci-fi elements are involved as you also encounter characters that come from the future, but that's all I will say to avoid spoilers. So the story is solid, with a strong cast of interesting characters. Unfortunately, the translation is total garbage. The fans who did it either used a very primitive software to do so, or they just have terrible English, since the dialogue often has nonsensical sentences or grammar mistakes. Well, it's free, and it's the only translation so far, so it is what it is, man. The graphics were a mixed bag for critics even in Japan, but not for me. They're all pixels, and I'm a fan of that, so I dig the style, even if it's a bit blurry and bland. Music wasn't done by Nobuo Uematsu though, it was by Base Escape, led by Hitoshi Sakimoto. It's a good soundtrack, but nothing extraordinary. The game is a grid-based strategy RPG. You control a few parties of characters, each with a leader and up to 2 soldiers. Sadly, everything is controlled by the stylus, which means you'll use your mouse for the entirety of the game on emulation. It's a slow burn, let me warn you, with extremely repetitive gameplay. Maps are very long and often come in pairs, so be sure to use save states and obviously a fast forward feature. Surprisingly, it is not a grind fest, but it gets a bit difficult later on, especially the overly frustrating final boss. So anyway, all actions except for combat use AP, such as movement, and you have to move every character individually, which is done on purpose, so you can have the option to strategize better, because the closer they are to their enemies, the higher the chance to hit them. Battles are turn-based, constantly moving between both screens so you can see the animations, but also so you can select your targets with the stylus. Regular attacks and skills have a range, but you can also use that to your advantage. The more you attack or receive damage, the more the special skill bar fills up. Once full, you can execute a special attack that does massive damage to one or all the enemies on screen. But only the protagonists can use it during their turn. You can also escape from battles, including bosses, which is really helpful if you're in a bind, so you can let another party take over, because these battles won't end until everyone is dead. What pisses me off about this though, is that when it's the enemy's turn and they attack you, you can't counter. You can't do anything, not even guard. Just stand there like an idiot getting hit. Maybe they felt this will make things harder, but it's just cheap and unfair. And guess what? Generic soldiers have permadeath. If they die during battle, you can revive them, but if it's the enemy's turn and they kill someone, they're gone forever. Yes, this is the battle system that influenced the Devil Survivor games, and thankfully Atlus was smart enough to avoid all of the mistakes this one did. Don't worry, I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just pointing out my complaints. The game's still pretty solid, and you can actually use an engage option with the generic soldiers at base. You sacrifice them so one of the main characters can learn one of their native skills. I didn't find it very useful though, but I'm sure you will. And there's only 7 classes total of soldiers you can summon with money. Equipment system is traditional and you have your shop at all times at base. So overall, the game's really unique, interesting and appealing. Despite its many issues, I loved it. There was just something about it that made me enjoy it greatly. Probably no one played it, not only because it was left in Japan, but also because no one talks about it.